Hello everyone, we are Jesica and Lucila. We are students of Second Language Acquisition at University of UNLPam, and we will talk about body enactment. Teachers frequently make use of listening and reading activities to teach new vocabulary. However, memory research has shown that vocabulary is better retained when we learn it through self-performed gestures. This is because using our bodies to perform new vocabulary, for example, related to action verbs, helps us retain words in our long-term memory. In the article exploring the neural representation of novel words learned through enactment in a word recognition task, Macedonia and Mueller proposed different theories which contribute to get a better understanding of the enactment effect.
The first theory, embedded in the framework of embodied cognition, explains that when students perform a gesture while learning new vocabulary, a motor trace in memory is left. A trace is an experience-related component in the functional network representing the word. So, if words are learned through enactment, later on, when listening, reading or watching the acquired words, motor cortices become active. The second theory, enhanced attention, suggests that the performance of a word with our body triggers the mental representation of that word. Therefore, there would be a double representation, verbal and visual, which boosts words retention. Researchers maintain this idea because the processing of words and image involves different channels in the brain and exploits both potentials. This double input allows our brains to acquire the knowledge quickly and easily.
So, learning vocabulary through gestures adds sensory-motor and proprioceptive information to the words in L2 and leads to more complex pathways in our brain of the word's representation. Novel words are retained better when we perform them because much more attention is paid in comparison to when we learn words by reading or listening to them. Besides, the authors state that attention is a basic component of retention as it induces representational stability in the hippocampus. Deep processing and retention occurs when novel words are combined with pre-existing ones, as during the encoding process, a distinction between those words is done. Making gestures involves the selection of arbitrary features related to a word that represent its semantics.
Another theory deals with a system-oriented approach. The authors state that the two memory systems are involved when learning novel words through enactment. The declarative memory is in charge of encoding written words, whereas the procedural memory is responsible for encoding actions, such as gestures. The aim of the study is to show the different experience-related components of the word network. Researchers designed this study in order to test word retention learned with iconic and semantically unrelated gestures.
Participants memorized 92 words in Vimy, which is an artificial language used during studies. Those novel words were accompanied by iconic or semantically unrelated gestures. Participants watched videos of an actress performing the gestures and saying the new words. Then, they were asked to repeat the word in Vimy and to perform the corresponding gesture. The training lasted for 4 days, and from the second until the 5th experiment day, memory performance was assessed through translation tests from German to Vimy and vice versa.
While doing the experiment, researchers noticed that better results as regards the retention of words were achieved with iconic gestures, rather than with semantically unrelated gestures. This works for both the short and long-term memory. Results were acquired in the following way. Participants were lying in the scanner, and they were randomly presented with visual and acoustical input of the words they had learned with iconic gestures and unknown words. Researchers found that bilateral areas of the thalamus were activated, which its function is to process incoming information and relay it to related specific areas in the cortex. Auditory cortices BA38, 41, and 42 responded upon acoustic word perception. These areas also stored representations of words. BA22 maps sound and word meaning. BA37 is implicated in reading, and BA40 mediates word recognition. Frontal eye field BA8 was active and possibly engaged in attention processes. The results suggest that mechanism of cognitive control might also contribute to the network engaged in word recognition.
Discussion. Even though the authors explain that brain areas engage in multiple functions partially overlap in different processes done along the present study, the data provides deep understanding of the functional representation of words learned through iconic gestures. As the authors state, words are not abstract units of the mind. Instead, they are based on bodily experiences created with our sensory motor systems.
For instance, if a child grasps an apple, smells it, sees the color and shape of it, feels the pulp and dripping juice and also points to the fruit and listens to someone else pronouncing the word, the kid will be able to retain the concept as she would be relating the new word with the experience she had. Embodiment research has demonstrated that a great number of abstract words are also grounded in bodily experiences.
For example, in a previous study carried out in an fMRI scanner, different emotions were read by participants. When reading it in the participants' brains, activity in the emotional network was found. More interestingly, there was also activation of the premotor cortex, which involves arm and face-related gestures.
Thus, we do not only retain concrete words which have a physical representation by bodily enactment, but also we learn in the same way abstract words. This may be because in daily life we realize our feelings and emotions through gestures, so we represent those abstract nouns or verbs with our body.
Extra research. After doing some research, we found an interesting piece of news which shows a similar study to this one in the University of Illinois was carried out. This study also dealt with teaching words through the use of iconic gestures and related gestures as well as without gestures.
Researchers concluded that new vocabulary is retained better if learners are exposed to gestures, no matter if they are iconic or not. However, we don't totally agree with this idea, since after reading both the study and the piece of news from the other one, we believe that acquisition of vocabulary is more significant if learned with iconic gestures.
Besides, Mueller and Macedonia's paper contains neuroscientific evidence as they perform an fMRI experiment, whereas in the Illinois University study, only a multiple-choice test after the input was presented as part of the experiments. It was the only means in which they could get results to their hypothesis. Further research.
We found another research which deals with the same topic but goes one step beyond, as it includes the idea that students learn better if gestures are combined with physical activity. Researchers employed two distinct models when teaching: embodying words through physical activity and gesturing, and embodying words through gesturing.
The difference between them was that in the former, students performed gestures of animals and also acted like them by moving, jumping, running around the place. On the contrary, in the latter, they could only perform the gestures but without moving from their places. Researchers claim that it is more beneficial if they learn with gestures plus physical activity, since it contributes with stimulating them not to be sedentary, and also they like it better.
Nevertheless, they do not show that there are cognitive differences between the two models, so learning with gestures or with gestures and physical activity have the same cognitive results. That is to say, vocabulary is better retained than learning it in the traditional way.
Teaching implications. We consider it is necessary to include body enactment when teaching vocabulary, whether it is abstract or concrete, because it has been demonstrated that vocabulary is acquired in a meaningful way.
Everything that students experience with their bodies would have a long-lasting effect on their memories, and therefore we change from just repeating long lists of words and learning them by heart to experiencing the language.
We believe that storytelling is a great opportunity to learn novel words while applying the enactment theory. We think that a possible activity to be done during a lesson can be that the teacher tells a story following these steps. First, the teacher needs to highlight important words, not only through his voice, but also by making the corresponding gestures. Then, students will have to repeat those gestures after watching them. After the teacher tells the story and the students do some activities for the correct comprehension of it, they will be asked to retell the story using the new vocabulary learned while using their bodies and gestures to represent the words.
Another activity that we believe is relevant consists of using songs that students can perform or dance so as to learn new vocabulary. For example, the Hokey Pokey. This is a wonderful song to learn prepositions and parts of the body while performing the song, as it gives instructions to the students that they will follow with their bodies. So, students will experience the movements of different body parts and they will understand and learn the prepositions by experiencing them. For example, putting their foot in or out a circle. Let's see a brief example.
And that's what it's all about. You put your left foot in, you take your left foot out. You put your left foot in, and you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. And that's what it's all about. You put your right arm in, you take your right arm out. You put your right arm in, and you shake it all about. You do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. And that's what it's all about.
Apart from dancing the song, a well-known game called Simon Says could be played in order to learn prepositions and objects. So, for example, the teacher says, hide under the table, stand behind the chair, sit on the floor, etc., and students will do the actions. And that was the end of this presentation. Feel free to leave your comments and opinions below. Thanks for watching!